Joining me now from Pittsburgh is NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell. And NBC's Vaughn Hillyard is in New York tracking all things Trump campaign. Kelly O, let me start with you. It's official. The debate rules are set. They're going to be the same rules as we saw back in the debate in June. Talk to me about what your sources are telling you inside the Harris campaign. How are they reacting to all of this?
Well, they are accepting that they are where they are. They had hoped to have some changes in the rules to allow for microphones to be hot or open, working for both candidates throughout the debate, and not just when a candidate has received a designated question. That was the plan under Joe Biden. That was his preference, his team's preference. Now with a new candidate in Kamala Harris with a different style, with a prosecutorial background that she would like to emphasize, she and her team had wanted to have the mics open the whole time. They have agreed to go forward because the Trump people wouldn't move off of that already agreed to list of items, which includes things like standing at lecterns, no notes or props, things that people in the audience will recognize from having watched past debates. This is a chance for them to have a face-off on Tuesday. We are here in Pittsburgh because she's actually doing her prep work with her senior team, going over how she wants to approach different issues, different planned exchanges in terms of anticipating what they think Donald Trump might say with her, and to help her to be ready for that. And choosing to do so in Pittsburgh because this is a big market in a very key battleground state of Pennsylvania. And so she'll get plenty of local attention here in local papers, local radio, local television, and the community being aware that she is choosing to spend multiple days here preparing. And then, of course, the debate itself in Philadelphia. But they are agreeing to go forward, even though they had hoped for some changes. Now, they do tell me that they expect that if there is a back and forth between the candidates, and we've certainly seen that style with Donald Trump in past debates, that they believe that there's an expectation that the host network would open up the microphone so the public could see it. That is something that the Harris campaign maintains is an expectation they have. It was not explicitly written in the rules put out by the host network. So they're getting going here. They're doing sort of the rounding third, heading home toward her first major contest on the presidential debate stage. Of course, 4 years ago, she debated Mike Pence, and she certainly debated in Democratic primary debates in the 2020 season. Kristen?
Kelly, you know, it's so interesting because one of the big questions looming over her campaign is what are the differences between her and President Biden? I'm going to be talking to Ian Sams with her campaign about this very question momentarily. But let me put this to you. In terms of this new economic policy that's been rolled out, where are the differences with President Biden, Kelly?
Well, in most ways and in big sweeping views, she and the president are very much together. Where she is trying to make a point is to take the issue that is really top of mind across the electorate, the economy, how people feel about their ability to spend money comfortably or not, and also what is at the root of that, jobs. And so trying to incentivize business development is something that also appeals to more center-right voters. Those could be independent voters. Those could be Republicans who do not want to vote for Donald Trump. The campaign is clearly making a very direct play for them and wanting to appeal a bit more centrist when you consider some of her other positions. Formerly, she had supported ending fracking, those kinds of things, her support for some of the environmental things. An economic plan that's a little bit to the right of President Biden is still centrist, and that's something they think can be an advantage for her. If she can articulate it and convince people, it would be good for jobs and for the economy. Kristen?
All right. We know that there'll still be a lot of attention on that focus. Kelly O'Donnell, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Vaughn, let me turn to you now. Let me ask you a similar question about Trump's economic policy. He pitched his plans today. Of course, he criticized Vice President Harris. We still don't have a whole lot of detail, though, on his policies. How much can you tell us about what he rolled out today?
Right, about 8 blocks from 30 Rock, he went and met with CEOs, investors, hedge fund managers, very prominent business folks in the New York community. This was to the Economic Club of New York here. And for the better part of an hour, he talked about economic tangential issues, talked about migration. And when it comes to the actual specifics of what his economic policy is, A lot of it is based on rescinding what the Biden-Harris administration effectively implemented over the last 4 years. Part of his new call today was to rescind funds that have been allocated so far under the Inflation Reduction Act. Of course, this was a piece of legislation passed by Congress. It's not clear exactly how he would seek to stop funding from going to certain programs. He called today for the government incentives for clean electric vehicles to be pulled back. He called for the reversal of clean carbon emission standards that was implemented under the Biden-Harris administration. He has called for tariffs of 10 to 20% today. He suggested that number may actually be higher than he has publicly suggested previously. That would be on all imported goods. And of course, there's one other headline from him today, and that was noting that he would intend to put Elon Musk, of course, his friend and the CEO of Tesla and X, at the helm of a commission to oversee what would be an effort to make the federal government more efficient and less financially bloated, in his words. And of course, part of that is looking for details, which we don't have at this point in time. But I would want to note, as part of this, 2 weeks before the 2020 election, he had signed an executive order that would have effectively allowed the federal government to transition thousands of federal career civil workers, their jobs to become politically appointed jobs. Of course, Joe Biden won the White House, and he rescinded that on day one, that executive order. But there are a lot of questions still exactly to some of the details that Donald Trump was putting out there into the ether here today.
Vaughn Hillyard, thank you so much for breaking it all down. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.